In today's episode, we're going to be talking about how the internet and technology have affected our generation. We're going to be looking at how it's changed the way we perceive ourselves and the importance of image, the potential dangers that come from the internet and social media, and how it has changed society and how it is affecting our generation.
People don't actually understand that whatever you put on the internet will kind of live on there forever. Even if you delete it off of your page, some website has that picture stored. But well-being wise, I think definitely like the rise of eating disorders, it just got so much worse with social media because everything is just so photoshopped and edited that nobody really has like a real sense of what they look like. You know, it causes like so much body dysmorphia and just such like a warped sense of self, basically.
Yeah, and related to that, health-wise, it's, for the first time ever, we have all this form of entertainment on demand, and Netflix and Hulu and Amazon and all this, and where now it's sort of become normal to sit and watch TV or movies for hours and hours on end. And even apart from that, just the amount of time that you spend on the screen or sitting down has obviously greatly increased within the last few decades. And for us, it's been like this since we were small, and we don't realize how this massive change has occurred with all these things that you can do through the internet, the way entertainment has changed with the creation of YouTube and Google and the other search engines. It's made life a lot easier in some ways, but also there's like a whole bunch of stuff that now is putting yourself on social media, having multiple accounts, and the fact that your personal data is basically available to whoever wants to purchase it for the sake of advertising. And that's something that we've sort of grown up with and understanding, and we've become desensitized to all that.
Yeah, definitely. Like with these social media trends, there's a lot of competitiveness, and everyone's always looking for more shock value and, more clicks. And it becomes like an addiction to the people that create this content and also to the people that consume it, because it's like you'll never quite be satisfied. You always want to find something better, something more shocking, something that's more out there. And I think out of that, these challenges are born, like eating Tide Pods.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah,
what you said
insane.
about consumerism, a lot of our experience online is based off of our own data, and there's this algorithm that takes into consideration, as you said, what shocks us the most. That's why Facebook and other sites will show you news that purposely is something that would bother you, because it understands that based off of your search history and all that, to provide you with something that will bother you or elicit an emotional response that will make you want to then talk about it more or click on an article. And all these services, Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram, it's all, free, as in there's no subscription, but you basically pay for it with everything that you search, everything that you do, all your online activity. That's sort of the price you pay. And for, I think, most people in our generation, that's just how it is, and we don't think twice about it.
Yeah, exactly. It's become almost like your algorithm knows you better than you know yourself. Like they know what's going to bother you, as you said, and they know what you're going to react to, even if you didn't know that yet.
In some ways, it does have its benefits, obviously. Like for me, my newsfeed, it's very personalized to me, so I don't get things that don't interest me. A lot of it's tailored towards my interests. But then, at the same time, Google, Facebook, all the social media, there's this consent to having your data used for personalized ads. Usually that means that then their partners and everyone else then also has access to the same information, because that's the way that they make money. Like it's right. Surprising how much money all these free websites make, YouTube and Facebook, just basically the whole tech industry.
Yeah, I've definitely observed that becoming more and more common. Now YouTube, instead of having one ad at the beginning of a video, you have two. And then Instagram completely changed their layout, where it becomes more like an online shopping app where you happen to post pictures on. It's not really like it was before. So I think they're they're really targeting people with a shopping addiction, I'd say.
Yeah, Instagram is an interesting one because when I made my account, there weren't a lot of ads, and then eventually they started coming up like where like the post would be, and you got those, a lot more, and then every time you would swipe on people's stories, then eventually you get an ad, and now, as you said, it's a whole section when you go like to feed to your profile. One of the things there is shopping, and you just see that a lot more.
Right, but it just makes so much sense for an app like Instagram because Instagram is like a platform where people are able to curate kind of characteristics that they wish they could be, and they kind of put that into kind of this collage of themselves that isn't really them, but then they get so caught up in that you always need to have like the newest and the most hyped up item. So a shopping feature would be really fitting for that.
And I wonder, I know this applies to people older than us as well, but I don't know if throughout history it was such a big deal for people of our age, sort of what you wore and sort of the brands you had. Like that was something more that you would pay more attention to as you grew older. It was a way to show your wealth or whatever, if it was a watch or shoes or cars. But it seems like we become more involved in that from a younger age nowadays.
Definitely. And also even just the difference between, I'd say, our age group when we were 11, 12 years old and between 11 and 12-year-olds right now, that difference is so dramatic. It honestly scares me because I don't remember kids that age being so materialistic and so caught up in what their image is. I think they were just more focused on being a child and simply existing. Whereas like 11, 12-year-olds today, they're just exposed to so much content that they have a stronger sense of self, I'd say, but they kind of lose that magic of not caring as much about how they're perceived.
Because that's the big reason people have accounts that there are influencers, is because there's people like that, and that's sort of what you have younger people looking up towards. It's that idea that how important your image is and how it connects to sort of what you wear and who you interact with and what you follow. And I think being exposed to that has not only an effect on what we choose to do online, but also what we choose to wear in school and sort of like how you are and how you portray yourself. There's a greater importance on that now. And as you grow older and become a teenager, that's just a normal part of growing up. But it's been, I think, inflated certainly because of our access to social media and being able to observe people older than us that also focus a lot on that sort of way of living and that philosophy.
Yeah, definitely. And like influencers, I think there's an influencer for every target audience, even for the kind of people that say that they hate influencers that have commodified spirituality. There's even something for those kind of people. And it's like they're the blueprint for this perfectionist idea of what that kind of person looks like. So it's almost like kind of, especially like teenagers or young kids that are kind of trying to find themselves and they're in an identity crisis. I think they can really feel a strong connection to those influencers because it's just such a clear image of exactly what they want to be, which makes them so much more prone to buy the products that these influencers promote.
What would you say the difference between an influencer and just another celebrity is?
I think an influencer is someone that knows how to play in on people's emotions, and they're not trying to hide it at all. They're very clear about that. Yes, this is my job. Like, this is what I do. But
that's true. That make their living or their job off of that. I guess it's different from a celebrity who, like an actor or a musician who has a career based off of that and then makes comments about whatever and has a large following and maybe gets involved politically. But that's different from someone whose whole livelihood is based off of that attention. And that's something that social media also tailors a lot to, the likes and followers. It's all about, popularity. And that's something that becomes more, I guess, prevalent across all internet sites, and again relates heavily to what changes you go through in middle school and older as a adolescent.
Yeah, I really like to get inside the mind of an influencer, because even though they might pretend to be so down to earth and so genuine, someone that makes a living off of portraying an image of themselves, which probably is not even that accurate, and then manages to capitalize on that, make money off of that, what kind of person is okay with their life being so public and to constantly be praised for everything they do? I think it really takes a narcissist to be able to function in a world like that.
And yet we were talking before we started about how a bunch of these people were caught at raves and parties for New Year. I mean, it says something when these are people who have such large followings and who are so influential, as they might say, and they choose to make such stupid decisions, and then, what do all their followers think about it? This is why it's hard to make issues like what we're going through now so serious and get people to understand the gravity of it.
I think all that praise and all that constant validation that they get from their followers and their fans, I guess, I think that gets to their head and makes them feel almost invincible. Because if they get caught at a party, okay, maybe they might be caught up in canceled culture. And people might say, oh, they're canceled. They might be trending on Twitter for a day or two. But 2 weeks later, everyone's forgotten about it. They haven't lost that many followers and they're still rich and they get to go party. So they don't really care that much.
Yeah. And talking about, these types of people, if you're presenting something or selling, a product or whatever your talent is, then it's understandable that there's sort of an industry built around that. But for a lot of these people, from at least what I've seen, I know I have a limited sort of view of this because I'm not interested in, and I don't spend a lot of time watching these kinds of people. But things like, live streaming, ones that I've seen where, they're not really doing anything, they're taking questions or whatever, or it's just them, like walking around, by their house or in a city. Like there's nothing going on that's all that interesting, and yet they feel the need to film themselves while doing this. And that's something that I think is, maybe we don't think twice about it, but I know that, older people, like my grandparents, for example, would not understand that or see how that's a product that people would be interested in.
I was thinking about that, like daily vloggers and family vloggers. It's like they have like a YouTube channel for their family, and these parents produce content, and that content is just what they do every day, and they film their kids dropping them off at school. How can a child consent to their life being so publicly shared? And there are comments underneath these videos, and people are commenting on the appearance of these kids, and these kids read these comments, but they never consented to that being their life and then being put out there so publicly. But they're kind of pushed into that life, and now everybody knows them, and there's no going back from that.
And that's another thing that's changed more recently, is that you have children that have an online presence from an early age because their parents are influencers or momfluencers, parents, or whatever you want to call them. And yeah, there's no way for them to consent. But even celebrities do this with their children, where they have their own accounts or whatever. And I think it's concerning to have that from such a young age. How adults sometimes make mistakes, or they say something wrong on the internet, and that can have huge issues or with their career, with their whole lives. And having that attention and pressure on you from a really young age, and I think it's a lot.
Yeah, I can't imagine what it's like growing up in an environment like that, where you're constantly getting a camera shoved in your face. So you're always so conscious about what you're doing and what you're saying. So you just live through this filtered idea of what people want you to be. And it's like in every family vlogger YouTube channel, there's they kind of stick a label on every child. Like, this is the funny one, this is the sassy one. And it puts these kids in a box where they feel like they have to identify with what the viewers want to see. Would you go as far as to call that child labor?
Well, it's certainly trying to capitalize on their children. It's not labor. They're not, I wouldn't say it is, because they're not doing much, but it is using child as a product almost.
Yeah, almost like a trophy. Going back to the products that these influencers promote, there's a really big trend of these haul videos where people, they go shopping, especially on Black Friday. Those videos are very popular, and they show each item they got, and they talk about it. I watched this video where this guy, he was talking about, why are these haul videos so popular? Like, why do people keep making them? It was like a trend that never dies. And apparently, people keep making these haul videos is because they can use it as a tax write-off. It's like their job. They can put that on their company, basically, those items that they got, because it's for work.
Oh, I didn't think about that.
Yeah.
Because I'd seen those, but there's other things that don't have any like economic advantage. I understand wanting to, if you're good at something, don't do it for free. But then there's things that are just sort of the mundane, everyday, personal things that influencers think are so important to their followers, and yet they have large followings of people who are interested in this.
What do you mean? What are those mundane things?
Haul videos, shopping videos, makeup tutorials,
but makeup tutorials. I don't really see how that's different from any other informational video. Because
it's not always informational. Showing you how to do something is one thing, but saying, "Oh, this is how you have." Just so many, like thousands, if not millions of videos like that. Yeah,
I think because it attracts a really large following, because there are a lot of consumers of makeup, and it's a tricky skill. Yeah, I think it's just like any other skill, but I don't know, maybe because it's so heavily related to appearance, it might come across really vain, like, oh, look at me making myself so attractive. I could see how people could perceive that as vain, but I think it's an art form that isn't really that recognized.
And going back to what you were saying about children, YouTube now has more guidelines and more of an apparatus around that, in censoring comments and controlling the type of content, because there were older people on there who were watching this content put out by kids. Whatever it is, like...
You mean like pedophiles?
Yeah, for sexual reasons.
Wow.
And that's just not something that you really had to deal with. And that's not the only threat that there is. I think, like, did your parents ever tell you when you were younger, like, not to talk to strangers online or anywhere or in the street? And I think, because that's sort of like the threat they perceive as one that's most obvious, but in reality, it's who you don't see. It's who's monitoring your content and who has access to your data.
It's terrifying, because it's like, do you take these videos down of kids at the pool? No, because that would mean that you see this child as a sex object that is, that is being looked at, which they are being looked at. But why should you have to blame the child for that? It's the pedophiles that's the issue, but it's so hard to catch them, really. But relating to pedophilia and on the internet, Omegle is like a hub for that. Omegle is like this online website where you can talk to strangers via chat or face to face through video, and then you can kind of skip through all these people, and you can talk to these random people from all across the globe, and you can even like kind of specify what your interests are. And I remember, like, me and my little cousins, like, when we were younger, we were so intrigued by this, because you just have access to so much, and just time after time, it's just nudity of these old men trying to talk to kids.
Yeah.
And with the rise of TikTok, Omegle is becoming really popular again. I'm just thinking about all these kids that are seeing these Omegle videos in their algorithm, and so they decide to go on Omegle, and they actually end up getting groomed by pedophiles.
TikTok's also something that definitely is targeted towards, I mean, obviously all people, but you do have a large demographic that is young girls who are taking more grown-up postures or dances or whatever you want to call it. And it's normalizing that maturity from a younger age. It's also something that I think is accessible to whoever follows you. Is that correct?
I partially agree with what you're saying. But I think, like, especially when we were younger, like, as girls, like, you're kind of taught to repress your sexuality, where it's more accepted for boys to explore that. So now I think it's becoming more and more accepted. But what you're saying about these dances and these poses, I agree, because most of them are targeted to the male gaze. And it's sad that that's the only way for young girls to explore what they could possibly look like, or to explore their identity, or the way they dress. Like they feel like they have to appeal to the male gaze in order to be viewed as attractive.
The thing about that, you might disagree with me, but I think that's partially because of who the models are for younger girls now. People like Cardi B or Nicki Minaj or the Kardashians, who their whole career and image is based off of that attractiveness and that sexual appeal, I guess you could call it. And that's sort of what is influencing the next generations.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily a like result of like men causing this. It's just like this is sort of the type of people that they follow, and therefore when you're young, when you're a teenager, you're subject to influence. And when these are the kind of people that you look up to, who are popular and who other people like, and you think that they are role models, and you'll imitate what they do. And unfortunately, the internet gives easy access to people like that, and there's this pressure to be like that and to conform to what those people think are the ideal appearance or body shape or whatever it may be.
Yeah, I agree with you partially. This might be a stretch, and don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to twist this to make this all men's fault. That's not what I'm trying to do. But what you said, like these role models, they kind of put out this hypersexualized image that these girls kind of want to imitate. And become more like these influencers. And absolutely, I think that's true. But those influencers are grown women. And I think a lot of their features and a lot of their aesthetic is kind of centered around pornography, because sex sells, and they know this. A picture of them in a bikini is going to get 5 times the amount of likes of them in a t-shirt and jeans. And that's how they make their money. And I think pornography in general is centered to the male gaze because they know that that is their main audience. Because then again, sexuality is less repressed in men than it is in women.
But for those types of photos and content, isn't it also the same reaction from women that they're also approving of that?
Yeah, that's something quite interesting I've been thinking about recently, is how, as a woman, can you see yourself as a sexual being without feeling like you are sexualized by men? If you know what I'm talking about, like, where do you draw the line? Like, am I doing this for myself, or am I doing this for the praise of someone else? And I think there's a thin line between those two. If
you look on Instagram or any social media where there's like a girl that has followers, if like her purpose isn't for like lewd photos, or if it's, I mean, even like anyone our age, it's mostly praise and compliments that come from other girls and other women, and not necessarily for men. And so I think, when you get older, there is that desire to be more appealing, but even from a young age, that sort of mentality is a way to gain popularity and confidence.
Definitely, there's a lot of truth to that. I think girls are more likely to engage with content on social media, especially from their peers. And I think that's just more accepted for girls to give each other compliments. But when, guys compliment each other, immediately someone suspects that they have romantic interest in each other, because people are just so uncomfortable with guys showing each other any kind of affection or praise. But I think, like, as a girl, I know that a lot of other girls have similar experiences, that when you're growing up, like when you're around the age of 14, 15, you're just like coming into puberty, and you're just starting to understand what it means to be seen in a sexual way. I think it's really hard for some girls to feel like they're worth something without a man telling them that they are worth something. And I'm not saying that this is entirely a man's issue. Not at all, actually. But I think a lot of girls carry a lot of internalized misogyny within them, and you have to actively unlearn that. And I think it takes your whole life to unlearn something like that, because it's taught systemically.
And it's not, I don't know if it's something forced on them by men or anything, but it's just, again, it's based off of the role models that they follow, and that's what's the image that they build for themselves, because those people are very conscious towards what their image is and their brand or their personality. And And then from a young age, there's more of that drive then to, post photos of yourself and to have this online presence, or even outside of the internet to dress a certain way or to wear makeup. I think from around middle school, would you say that you sort of see that change start to happen with young girls, where there's more attention paid to how others perceive them?
Definitely, of course. But I don't think that it's avoidable, no matter like what people you follow. Like as a girl in middle school or in like 9th grade, 10th grade, you could expose yourself to like the most healthy role models and you would still suffer with an identity crisis around how men perceive you. I don't think you can decide not to expose yourself to that.
Would you say men, or just any of your peers, or the world in general?
I think I'm just talking specifically about the male gaze. I'm talking specifically about how the validation that boys or men give them.
But isn't that desire to build an image and to focus on that driven also by your peers?
Yeah, of course. But I'm saying just talking about, I'm not saying that that's not a thing. It is. But I think it's very different from how they worry how boys perceive them rather than how other girls perceive them.
I want to move on from this and talk more about the other dangers that we might face at this day and age with widespread uses of social media. And I think perhaps with this has come more of a desire to grow up and to mature and to become more independent.
Yeah, definitely. And it makes me sad, like seeing how many kids have phones. I don't know. I just can't imagine what it's like growing up right now. Like I just can't even imagine. It would drive me insane, and I think it's gonna cause so many identity issues and so many body image issues in these young kids, and it just like scares me how they're gonna develop as people.
How old were you when you got your first phone?
I got my first phone when I was 8, but it was like a flip phone. Because I took the train to school by myself, so I had to let my mom know when I was on the train. So it was for practical reasons, but I didn't text anyone on it because none of my friends had phones. I only had it to let my mom know that I was safe. Yeah,
because I think I was 9 or 10, but as you said, I couldn't call or text anyone. I used it more as like an iPod. Today children get tablets or phones from much younger age, apart from how that will affect them psychologically, but even in the earlier like growth stages, 5 or 6 and younger, affects ways that they communicate, which I guess you could say is expected, but also in things like in flexibility and dexterity, because parents would rather give their kid an iPad instead of toys or building blocks, because they'll be occupied with that more.
Yeah, and so they don't need to like constantly entertain their child or pay attention to it because they know that the iPad will take care of it.
And you can put on parental locks for everything, but to some extent the greatest threats are impossible or very difficult to avoid if you want to continue using the internet or those same services, even YouTube. Like, just imagine from like the time of like 6 or 7, and from then onwards building this online portfolio of all your interests and search habits that can then be used by companies to advertise to you and to sell to you or to your parents.
It's terrifying. But also, like, when I look at like my friends, their younger siblings, I feel like these kids have such a strong sense of identity and have such a strong sense of like what their interests are. And even in just like the way that they dress, like they have like a really rounded sense of what they like presenting themselves as. And I definitely didn't have that same understanding of myself when I was their age. And I just wonder what they're going to look like in 2 years' time from now, like as they start to explore their identity more and more.
Because you're exposed to so much more.
Yeah, exactly.
Through that.
Exactly.
Growing up in our parents' time or older, you were sort of, you were restricted to whoever was within your friend group. there was
Mm-hmm.
no meeting up with people beyond that. If you wanted to watch TV or whoever it was, you would either you have to wait till it was on television, or you have to go in and buy a CD. And there was no people streaming. There was no Logan Paul or PewDiePie, and now that's all immediately accessible.
And also, I think like as kids, because like maybe that wasn't always accessible to us. Like entertainment wasn't always just there. Like you had to wait for your favorite like program to be on TV. You kind of had to make do with what's in your environment. And now like kids don't really have to do that anymore. Like everything is just readily available to you. So I think they've just become so easily bored of things. Like they always need to switch. They constantly need to be stimulated.
Yeah, that's true. I wonder, maybe teachers would have a better understanding of how that, because they can see the differences from age group to age group as they grow older. For us, we're sort of limited to whoever our younger siblings or our friends' younger siblings are. But even with that small sample size, we can perceive those changes and those differences. And as you said, compared to our lives, even though the age gap might not be that different, the attitude and personalities are much different from how we were when we were that age. I think as a parent, you'd be more concerned of what that presence would mean towards their future. Like, as I said, adults can be fired for things that they say on Twitter today. And imagine having like that, all that evidence, all that pressure on you from like the age of 10 or 11. There's people who have found like, oh, I found a homophobic or racist tweet from this guy's Twitter from 2 years ago. Imagine having to have that same amount of attention for decades, not to mention the fact that sort of what is politically correct and what is the social standard constantly changes, and something that might be okay at the time won't be in a few years' time.
Yeah, exactly. And like a lot of people, like, I don't want to hear half the things I said when I was 14. I would not like to revisit that. But like today's kids are going to have to. Like they're going to have a digital footprint. Like even if they have a Twitter account, like 2 years from now, they're going to cringe so bad at the things they said, or they're going to feel so much regret. But that's going to follow them when they go to apply for a job. Their employer might bring those things up, and that's a scary thing when you evolve so quickly when you're so young.
And as far as safety, most websites, by default, if you accept the terms and conditions, and that's sort of access to your history, but also your location. For me, I always manually turn off everything. That's not an option, that I don't use the site. But I feel like people from our generation and younger will pay no attention to that and not think twice about it.
Yeah, definitely. And it's just so easy to click agree. Nobody's going to read through all of that. And they can so easily change the terms and conditions once you've agreed without notifying you that they did that.
Like maybe older parents, their image of a stalker is someone in a white van selling candy, right?
Mm-hmm.
But today, in reality, it's basically any site that you visit. The one site I visited to read something for this episode, looking through, one of the terms that it automatically was agreed to was, granting permission for the site and their partners to track your location down to a few meters.
Wow.
And it's like, and a lot more people can follow you and see what you do from that than they would be able to do physically in the real world.
What you were saying about parents seeing stalkers as like this predator in a white van offering you candy, I feel like that's something that almost every single child has heard, but hardly any child has ever experienced. I think the real predators are also always much closer than the kids think that they are. It's just snarky things that adults say to them, thinking the kid won't notice. Like these little predatory things that they think the kids won't say anything about.
And the real threat, is really to your individuality. If the algorithm algorithm of what you get. It will make you think a certain way politically or socially. And if you're, I mean, even if, I guess if you're an adult, you're maybe more aware of that bias and manipulation. But if you're a child, it's basically whoever has the most influence, whoever controls your feed, will then be able to determine how you vote in the future and what kind of person you become.
Yeah, I think it's important as parents to talk to your kids about net neutrality and how specific algorithms are, that's not a whole rounded view of what the world is like. Because I guess, like, as a young child, imagine, just take TikTok, for example. You're scrolling through that algorithm and you see these very specific things. And imagine if you're going to base your worldview off of what you see on there. You're going to think that's just a representation of what the world is.
And these people will consent to people having ads that will manipulate you and giving away your data, and yet we're thankful and thank them for doing it with our likes and with the money that they get in ads. When the president tried to ban TikTok over those privacy concerns, and with its sort of connection to the CCP, everyone was outraged over that and disappointed that it might mean the end of TikTok, without any consideration to the fact of why it was a concern.
Yeah, definitely. But I think, even if you ban TikTok, there's going to be another platform that pops up. People were already moving to another platform as soon as that was announced. I forgot what it's called. But yeah, I think, like, when you ban something, there's just going to be something else that pops up. You can't really escape it. I think when there's such a high demand for something, it's going to be really hard to outrun that.
But the point is that they'll do this, and yet we pay no attention to that. Like, YouTube increasing the amount of ads it has, like, what are we going to do? Like, there is no other platform that has as much content as that.
Yeah, like, what are you going to do? Switch to Vimeo? Like, no.
Yeah, they know that we have no other choice.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you're almost like a slave to it. Because, like, I don't know, we're just like, and YouTube knows this, how much people rely on it and how much people are depend on that platform. So they feel like they can get away with almost anything, and they can. I think that rounds up today's episode. It was an interesting conversation. We didn't agree on everything, but I thought it was interesting to see how you thought about these things.